Kiri, thank you so much for coming on the Easy Pray podcast today.
Oh, thanks, Chris. Great to be here.
So, can you give myself and the listeners a little bit of background about who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name's Kiri Addison. I'm a product manager at Mimecast, which is a cybersecurity company focused very much on email security. So there I work very closely with our researchers, with our engineers, developing products to keep up with the ever-changing threat landscape, make sure our customers are protected from malicious emails.
Awesome. Is there something that got you interested in that field, or was it just kind of the natural course of your career?
So I've always been very much interested in technology, from a very young age. I have kind of more of an academic background in the sciences and I suppose, really fell into cybersecurity by a bit of luck, really. So once I'd finished my studies, I was kind of knew I wanted to get out of the academic world into the real world. And I was lucky enough to find a job working for the UK government as a tax fraud and risk analyst there. Really loved that kind of work. And then from there, it was a natural progression into cybersecurity.
That's great. And one of the questions that I asked many of my guests is, have you ever been a victim of a cybersecurity incident, a scam, or a fraud?
I kind of trying to think. I don't think I have. I kind of concerned maybe I'm making myself a bit of a target by saying that. I don't remember ever being so, but I certainly know people like very close to me in my family who have.
Yeah, I've often heard it said that either you're a victim of a cybersecurity incident, or you weren't, or you didn't realize it. But one of the two.
Yeah, and being the kind of cybersecurity person in the family, I always feel a bit of responsibility when that happens.
Yeah, I'm the same way. So let's talk about kind of the trends and what you're seeing in email security and cybersecurity. What specifically, I think one of the interesting things is how criminals are just constantly evolving with the latest news, with the latest tech. But what is it that you guys are seeing?
Yeah, so email obviously still the number one attack vector and ever increasing. Like you say, criminals always finding new things to exploit, new techniques, particularly, like based on what's going on kind of in the world around us, particular events. One thing that is dying off, thankfully, is the COVID emails.
Yeah.
We saw a lot of those for a long time. That they are thankfully dropping off. But I mean, really, it's anything that's going on. Just earlier today, I was looking at some examples that have come through, and I saw an Easter themed Amazon scam. So like they'll really, they'll jump on anything.
How quickly do they implement kind of newsworthy things in the scams? Is it days, weeks, months, hours?
Yeah, I mean, it varies, but it can be, very, very quick. Because some things, like an event like Easter or Christmas, there's a big lead up to it, particularly with things like Christmas. It kind of feels like it's going on forever. But some things are just, they happen there and then. You're not expecting it, and they're jumping on that as quickly as they can before people forget about it and it becomes irrelevant.
Yeah, I've sometimes been surprised at the speed of, like, I just saw that on the news yesterday and it's already in a scam email. I'm like, wow, like I kind of wonder if in the scammer offices there is a person who's dedicated to just reading the news every day and looking for breaking news to say, hey, that's our vector for today.
Yeah, probably have their intelligence division sitting.
So are people getting better at, I guess two questions. Is the technology getting better at preventing the phishing scams and these types of emails from getting into the inboxes? And are users getting any better about not falling for them?
Yeah, that's interesting questions there. Yes, I think kind of overall, we can say technology is improving. I think there's, good coverage against basic kind of attacks and techniques. I mean, we still kind of recommend layering up your defenses when it comes to email security, just because things, evolve so quickly. So have your basic email provider and then stick another security solution on top to cover the kind of emerging and new threats. But it's definitely something that's constantly changing. And in terms of end users, I think we see that kind of 70% of phishing emails are still opened by end users. So, we're not saying that necessarily they're interacting, giving away their credentials, but there's still some improvement and way to go there. I think as well, like it comes down to awareness training. So end users kind of know the basics, like, look out for poor spelling and stuff like that, but they don't necessarily know, what's the latest threat. Like, if someone's seen something on the news, like you were saying, and they send out a new phishing email based on that, they're probably not thinking, I need to be aware of what's going on currently when I'm thinking about phishing emails as well.
Yeah. Do kind of end users, is there a mindset that, oh, well, my email provider, my ISP, my company has done the most excellent job on the planet, and there's no way that a phishing email could possibly get into my inbox, therefore any email must be legitimate? Is there a bit of that going around?
Yeah, potentially. There is a lot. We've seen ourselves, like with awareness training, end users who have regular awareness training and know that these things do get through, and they can get through. What to do about it? It improves their click rates on malicious links. So end users who have regular awareness training are 5 times less likely to click on malicious links.
Well, that's a significant impact of that training.
Yeah.
Was there any research done on like how frequently that training needs to be done to maintain that level of awareness?
That's an interesting question. I think when we were looking at those stats, the training was done at least quarterly, perhaps more. So it's, it can't just be something you do once a year to kind of tick a box. You have to keep on top of it.
There's good that there's at least a quarter's worth of retention in people's minds. I think about what I do, and I kind of wonder if would I have that much retention several months out.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, is it getting more complicated with like ChatGPT writing, addressing some of the grammar issues? Do you think it's getting more difficult for the threat intelligence?
Yeah, I do wonder, like with ChatGPT, if we're going to have to change our advice to people. Instead of looking out for spelling mistakes, look out for grammar that's too good to have come from a human instead. But there's obviously been a lot of kind of talk around how it's going to revolutionize phishing. And to be honest, I can't say that I've seen a load of phishing emails created by ChatGPT, but then it's very hard to say if they have been or not. So I think we're still at the early stages of really seeing actually what is the impact. Is it just hype or is it real?
Yeah. So I guess from a perspective of let's switch from kind of the end user perspective to the corporate side. I know I've had people from Amazon on, and they talk about everything that they're doing to educate their customers and trying to communicate. Are there what should kind of I own my own small business. Let's say we're talking to someone who owns a business. What sort of things should they be doing both to protect their outbound email and protect their inbound email to their staff?
Yeah, so obviously inbound, there are a lot of kind of technical controls that you can put in place, like that kind of email security scanning capabilities, and that needs to obviously also cover malicious attachments or potentially malicious attachments and scanning of links as well that can be clicked on. That's a big thing to cover inbound. See internally, and you've got your end user awareness training, so making sure that your users are aware of the impact that they can have by clicking or opening a malicious attachment. And I guess I try to think about telling them about what potential impact it could have on their personal lives. So in a lot of the kind of advice and training, we say, don't reuse your personal passwords because they could be used to get into your work account, or don't reuse your work passwords because they could be used to get into your personal accounts. Maybe that might help get the message through to people, to make it a bit more personal. So yeah, definitely awareness training is vital there. You mentioned outbound email as well, and again, like, technical email inspection, email security scanning, applying exactly the same controls as you would on the inbound to the outbound as well.
Mm. I know there are a number of protocols, security and one of the things we've talked about on the podcast in the past is that the internet was never designed from a security perspective, at least not initially, and handling of email was never designed with security in mind. It was always this implicit trust of I claim I'm from this educational institution, and this email is from this email account at this institution. Here you go. And when it was educational institution to educational institution, that worked. And I don't think anyone really thought of, well, gosh, we really need to authenticate who's giving us email. How have kind of that hodgepodge of security protocols and authentication protocols actually helped?
So I'd say they definitely do help if you're thinking about how you can protect your brand from being impersonated and spoofed, but it's a case of, implementing them and implementing them correctly. So you've got the SPF, which is all about validating who is allowed to kind of send on your behalf. You've got the kind of DKIM, which is about ensuring that, the message comes from who it claims to come from. And then you've got the DMARC protocol, which kind of combines both of those, kind of uses the best of those together. So, DMARC, it works well. It's kind of something that you can do to understand who might be trying to spoof your brand and send on your behalf. But it can be a very tricky thing to set up and get it working smoothly, and it can take a long time. So kind of small businesses, it may be something that you would require help with to do that. But definitely, worth doing it. And if everyone did it, then, we'd all help each other out.
Yeah. Is that one of the challenges because there's so many different authentication methodologies out there, and they're potentially really messy to implement, and if you're not careful, they're like, oh, I've now started to use MailChimp to send on my behalf, and I forget to update these things. Gosh, none of my newsletters are getting to my people. Has that made kind of email security in general more difficult?
Yeah, definitely. So you need to have a certain level of understanding of how this could potentially go wrong and impact you to, be able to get on it quickly and resolve the issues. I also think sometimes, people are looking at compliance and it's just a tick box to say you have DMARC. You don't necessarily, you're not really enforcing it, but you're kind of using it. And that's just enough.
Yeah, I historically have gotten emails from, I'm putting in air quotes for those that are just listening, security research who are, it's always phrased this way, your website is vulnerable because you don't have DMARC enabled.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, those are not, your website's not secure because of DMARC. I'm like, no, those are different things. But it's funny because there's some of these platforms, there's ways to put them, to implement them such that they're technically implemented, but they're not actually doing anything. We've got these flags and all these things are kind of in this test mode.
Yeah, they just get set and forgotten.
Yeah. Are there things that companies should be doing? Let me ask your position on this. Companies that force their employees to change their passwords on a semi-frequent basis, either monthly, quarterly, or annually. Do you see that as a good practice to prevent employee emails from being hacked?
I think it's better to encourage people to not reuse their passwords and create strong passwords the first time, use password managers. If you enforce someone to change their password constantly, they're probably just going to add like a 1, 2, change it 3 on the end. So I don't think it's the most effective method.
Yeah, from working in IT, I've realized that was the the most common thing that people did is they just reused the same password and added a one, added two, or added the year at the end of the
Yeah.
password. Just to, hey, this is the this is my compromised password for this year. Are you seeing more companies utilizing 2FA, whether it's SMS or token or authenticator apps for their employee emails, just to keep those? Just to make, I'm thinking like in terms of keeping employee emails from being used to either scam other employees or scam customers, that sort of thing.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing an increase in that being used, which is good. I think generally people are getting the message that yeah, multi-factor authentication is a good thing to do. I've heard it's more kind of region dependent though. So we have a lot of people in the UK, US doing it, but not so much in other regions yet.
Gotcha. And I guess on the flip side of it, what would you recommend for end users to do both to protect inbound and outbound?
I think it's like be suspicious. Take a bit of time. Like don't feel pressured. I think the number one thing that attackers are doing at the moment, particularly with kind of your business email compromise kind of attacks, is using social engineering. So trying to put some pressure on you, making something sound urgent, like I mean, impersonate, a senior person within the organization. The typical thing is to say, oh, can you help me with this urgent task? I really need your help quickly. And that's to start a conversation with them, maybe to try and get them to switch communication channels. So, if you think something's off, just pause, don't be pressured and report it.
It's always those urgency from someone that has a level of authority, whether they're our
Yeah.
boss, whether they're law enforcement, whether they're government, and that emotional connect, that some emotional element of that. If this does happen quickly, something good will happen,
Yeah.
and if this doesn't happen, something bad will happen.
Yeah, exactly.
which is that those kind of, it's unfortunate because those are also techniques that are used in general marketing to a
Yeah.
lesser extent. So just because there's urgency doesn't necessarily mean that it's a scam, but it's a good it's a good indicator.
Yeah, not necessarily. And I guess also it comes down to like, what's the potential impact of this?
Yeah.
Are they asking me to make a huge wire transfer or send them some information, which is potentially sensitive?
Yeah. I've seen, I've never seen on a company that I've worked for, but I've seen those kind of alerts at the top or the bottom of the email saying, "Hey, this email came in from someone outside of the company." I assume the intent is to either get people aware of like this really just isn't a person inside of the company, but is this to kind of help prevent impersonation, where someone who's bought the used an email address which looks similar to the boss's email address using their name, and so it catches that and alerts the person that they're outside.
Yeah, exactly. Just, it's just there to give you a bit of a flag. And kind of make the person think, okay, this person may not be exactly who I think they're.
And it makes me wonder if uh, that helps the success rate where the boss's email actually was compromised.
Yeah. Yeah, this is another like issue that we're having, and we're seeing more and more the use of actually compromised accounts. And it just makes it even harder for the end user to figure out that this is an attack and not a genuine request from that user.
So, so I mean, are there things that could be done on on a technical level to know whether it's the boss sending the email or it's been compromised? I'm just kind of like thinking outside of the normal scope of operation here.
Yeah, so I suppose you can look for kind of abnormal communication patterns. So yeah, would this person normally communicate with this person, whether it's from a genuine compromised account or not? What's the abnormal volume of requests being made? Is it coming from a location that this person would usually be in? The time this person would normally be sending from the kind of device that someone would normally be using. So those kind of anomaly can be used to detect something like that.
I know I just recently got got what appeared to be a message from a social media account from a friend of mine, and it came in at what would have been like 1 a.m. their time, and I'm like, this friend of mine never communicates with me on social media, which was a dead giveaway. And then I know they're not up at 1 o'clock in the morning asking me how my day was. That's that's just out of character for them. So I had fired off an email saying, "Hey, either your account's been compromised or it's a cloned account. You better do something."
Oh yeah, and like checking with the actual person, that's one of the best things you can do.
And I suppose that applies, particularly for family members. If you get an email that appears to be from a family member saying, "Hey, I'm traveling and I lost my passport. Can you wire me some money? I'm stuck overseas."
Yeah, actually, one of my friends recently was actually fooled by a scam like that. One of their friends' accounts was compromised, and she received an email saying, "Oh, my daughter's in trouble. I need to send her some money, but I can't do it. I don't know how to use like Apple gift cards. Can you do it for me and send me the voucher codes?" And unfortunately, she fell for the scam. But luckily the voucher codes weren't used before by the time she reported it to Apple, so she managed to get her money back.
That's pretty good that she was able to. She was very lucky that they hadn't
Yes.
claimed the voucher codes quickly.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of those things that's particularly insidious. I mean, we can do things to be cautious of emails that are coming from random email addresses, but as soon as it comes from from a family member's account, names us by name, it starts to get a little bit more difficult to catch those things that are just off.
Yeah, especially when you've got that kind of psychological and emotional element to it, manipulating.
Are you? I mean, most of what you provide is for corporate platforms, correct?
Yes, yeah.
Do you see much of those personal types, and you even have visibility? Do you see much of those personal types account attacks on corporate accounts?
A little bit, but kind of there is definitely a difference, between the stuff that we see in our own personal inboxes and what we see coming through. But you do see a bit of overlap, particularly with the kind of extortion type ones. They're I've hacked into your computer and seen you doing something dodgy over your webcam. Send me
Mm-hmm.
some Bitcoin or I'm going to release the video. So those ones you do see quite a lot. I suppose there's that level of potential embarrassment there for people that they wouldn't want to have at work. So.
Yeah, yeah. Are you seeing? You talked earlier about email continuing to be the number one threat vector. Is it just increasing? Because I hear news stories about, spam volumes are up, spam volumes are down. Kind of depending on the the news organization and the way the wind is blowing, you seem to get different answers. Are you seeing just the overall volume going up?
I wouldn't say it's just the volume, it's the kind of some of the techniques as well and the social engineering aspects which are changing. So in particular, we're seeing a lot of abuse of file sharing sites to host malicious content. So you'll typically get a link in an email that might take you to SharePoint, for example, which is, fine, you're not going to block access to SharePoint. But within that site, there'll be a link that takes you to another kind of phishing page that's designed to harvest your credentials. Or on that one, there might even be a further link. So combining legitimate sites that end users are used to using in their everyday lives, coming from compromised accounts, and then these kind of multi-stage attacks, which take you kind of your scanners further and further away from the actual malicious payload to make it harder for your technical controls to detect what's going on.
Yeah, I've definitely gotten waves of those. So and so has shared this document with you. I'm like, I don't know who you are. I'm not, I don't know what that document service is. I'm not clicking on that. But I guess it's in the corporate environment. If you're using SharePoint, if I'm not using SharePoint, I
Yeah.
that that's never a thought to me that someone internal in my company is using SharePoint, sending me a SharePoint link. It's not going to happen. Although if someone had sent me a Dropbox link or a Box link, maybe that might be a little bit more effective in my
Yeah,
organization.
definitely. We do see like attackers putting effort into obviously researching the supply chain, who's it's coming from, kind of using the logo of the company you would be working with. So they will in certain cases make it as convincing as possible.
Are there any other trends that you're seeing?
Um, Kind of automation of the kind of first stage of BC attacks. So that sending out that initial kind of, hi, can you help me with a task email? So we used to see that coming from certain actors, criminal groups based in Africa, and that would all be done manually. They'd have teams of people that are doing that. But more recently, we've seen that first stage being automated, which means they can just send out loads of them and wait for the responses to come in. And the way they can, like how they can do this really is by using compromised Office credentials, which they can now very easily get their hands on.
Mm-hmm.
So they can, they don't have to kind of use one account to send out thousands of emails. They have thousands of accounts and they can send out a few emails from each one, which means that those compromised accounts don't necessarily get recognized and blocked. So that's made a big kind of difference. We've seen big spikes in those.
Are there other trends that are kind of interesting or humorous or unlikely that you've seen happen?
Um, I think the interesting one for me, like I know we touched on slightly earlier, is the kind of chat GPT and how that may be used. So, like I say, it's very hard for us to say whether we've received any phishing emails
Yeah.
created using this or not. But we've been thinking about how would we detect this. So we started trying to look at AI text generation detectors. What we found is that the off-the-shelf tools, they have kind of questionable accuracy
Yeah.
at the best of times. But even when they do detect it, you can change a word or add a spelling mistake, and then they recognize it as human rather than AI generated. So it's kind of interesting to see if that technology will get better. In the meantime, what we're doing is we're creating our own phishing emails using ChatGPT or GPT-3, and adding that to our training set for our machine learning models, so we can kind of take those into account in that way, rather than specifically trying to say this is AI generated text.
Yeah, I played around with a number of those chat GPT detection tools,
Yeah,
and I would say that most of them were uh, they would respond back to something like, oh, "This is 80% likely to be Chat GPT generated," on something that I generated 30 seconds before I plugged it into
yeah.
their tool, and I'm like, okay, so these really aren't either I'm a robot and I don't know it, or these tools just are not very sophisticated yet, or they're just a total scam. I don't know.
Yeah, they're not the best yet, certainly.
Do you see that as a not the detection tools, but as generative AI iterates and becomes better? Do you see that as becoming more and more complicated to protect users against those types of platforms, or
um,
not from the platforms, but by things generated by the platforms?
Potentially, but then I suppose it just, again, a lot of it's still going to come down to like awareness training of users,
Yeah.
and you can generate the best content for your email, but you still have to send it, and there's lots of kind of tells from, um, the actual delivery of the email. So um, I don't think it's going to be like the end of the world. Certainly
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. It doesn't matter how well written the email that I get from Wells Fargo is, because I don't use Wells Fargo.
Yeah, exactly.
And those practices of, like, even if I got an email from my bank, I'm not clicking on anything in it because I'm paranoid when it
Yeah,
comes to financial institutions.
yeah. Even if it's very well written, okay, I don't click on links. I go directly to the site. So
Yeah, there's one gentleman that I was interviewing that his position was, I have a separate computer that does not have email on it that I use for all my financial transactions. And it's only turned on and only used for financial transactions. And I never do financial transactions on these on any other device that I have, just so I know I'm not clicking on a link, or I'm not going to a fake website, or that I'm being extremely paranoid about it. Like I probably not that I'm not that paranoid, but I'm definitely not clicking on links. I have, in some sense, I'm kind of still surprised that email is still a valid vector in terms of phishing and getting people to click on links, given so much news coverage and so much training, that it's still the issue that it is.
Yeah, I think it all comes down to psychology, really, and the manipulation.
Yep. So, is there any other advice that you have to offer as we wrap up here? Are there any particular resources that Mimecast has available if people want to kind of learn about what's going on in the state of email security?
Yeah, so we've recently released our State of Email Security Research Report. You can find that on our website. We also have a blog section there, along with a lot more information. So I'd recommend checking that out.
And we'll definitely link to that in the show notes. And I know that even if we're not going through corporate trainings on what the latest stuff is, it's really important to at least be tangentially aware of what's going on in terms of email security, what the latest scams are, the latest techniques. Even if we're not seeing them, it's just best to be kind of have that in the back of our head when we have those emails coming in that are suspicious. So, Kiri, if people want to find you and Mimecast online, where can they find you guys?
Yep, you can find Mimecast at mimecast.com. Very easy there.
And social media as well?
Yep, social media I'm on LinkedIn. We've got Twitter. So, yeah.
Great. Kiri, thank you so much for coming on the Easy Pray podcast today.
Thanks for having me, Chris.